Well, first of all, I mean, we could say thanks to both you guys for agreeing to jump on with us. Obviously, both huge influences in both of our careers, and it's also huge for both of us that we became friends with both you guys. And speaking from on a personal note, this is a match that I had studied when I was coming up and I was very young in the business, and one that I watched strictly. I mean, it was a perfect storytelling match and psychology and everything about it. And I just remember rewatching it, just taking different pieces away every time that I watched it. So it's exciting for us to be able to talk to both you guys about it. And just, at the time, not sure if it was meant to be that way, but it was a match that really changed the direction of the whole industry. And, again, thanks for taking the time to do this with us, guys.
Absolutely. It's fun for me anyway. I'm happy to do it.
Well, let's get into it because I know you guys don't got a lot of time. So in looking at this match, the end result of this thing, everything changes. Everything in the industry from this point forward, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, this match changes everything. It changes the direction of the WWE. It changes the direction of both of your characters. When was it that you guys knew that this was going to happen coming out of this match, or that you wanted it to happen coming out of this match? Did it just happen organically throughout the months and the build up to it, or did you? I mean, was there a plan to do this? I guess.
I don't think Steve knew anything about what they had in mind for me till the last minute, till that day. Steve was the first guy to come up to me and say, Vince talked to him about me turning heel. Nobody up to that point, including everyone else in the dressing room, knew anything about it as far as I knew. So it was really, we only had, as I remember all of this back at this time, we just worked the Survivor Series, and we had a great match at Survivor Series.
Yep.
But we didn't expect to work again for a while. We were going to sort of come back a longer break, like maybe SummerSlam or something like that. We knew we were going to work together again, but it was kind of like we had done our thing, and we were going to let some time come between us. As things came out with Sean, with the belt, where he forfeited the belt and all that, and suddenly we were both sort of stuck with each other again. I remember thought WrestleMania with Steve was kind of we were going in kind of cold in the sense that we'd already worked and kind of had done all our best stuff that we could think of to do in the Survivor Series, and I felt like it was not where I'd expected to be working with Sean that WrestleMania, and then he'd forfeited. So I was kind of a little bit in limbo as far as where I was going, and Steve seemed like just sort of a substitute. Even though Steve was hot, then the Rumble thing that led into us. We at least for me, I just kept sort of following the storyline, and Steve was just following his own storyline. We just kept sort of overlapping each other in a good way. I really loved working with Steve at Survivor Series, and I loved the chemistry we had, and I wanted to do something really special with Steve, and I didn't think it was going to happen at WrestleMania. I thought WrestleMania was kind of putting us together a little too soon again. But in saying all that, once we got there that day, and my whole character was going to change, and Steve talked to me and kind of was not sure how his character was going to go, whether he was going to become a babyface, or that's kind of where they were taking him, but he wanted to take his time getting there, as far as I remember. It was like, so we didn't want to completely turn him, Steve, into a sort of a good guy right out of one match kind of thing. So it's like he's going to stay the same style, and I'm going to stay more an aggressive heel style or babyface heel style. And what I love about the match, right from the start, is just the entrances and when you watch how Steve and I both go in the ring.
Yeah.
He was the heel. He was the bad guy. I walk out, I'm kind of cheered, and I'm kind of the cool baby face, and I'm coming in for revenge. And it's funny how we were completely switched over by the end of it, and we never changed our styles. We never did anything other than wrestle the same way we did all the time. And it was just an amazing, I think, a bit of psychology in the two wrestlers being able to read each other's characters.
And going back to the Survivor Series thing, when you pretty much handpicked me, Brett, because you were making a comeback from having your knee cleaned up, and that was a big honor for me because we had worked at a couple of house shows, I'd started off working with Sean, and I believe we were down there in Houston, Texas, and I just worked with Sean. And you said to me in the dressing room, you said, "Hey man, that was a great match." He goes, "You said I'll work with you anytime," and that was a big compliment to me because I was a huge Bret Hart fan before I'd come to the Federation. And Bret got into business a little bit earlier than me. Obviously, got started way earlier over in Calgary, so I'd seen his entire body of work. And Bret, is such a high level guy with such multiple layers of psychology and all the the technical aspects and mechanical aspects that he brings, and he brought a reality based product to the ring. We've always known that the business is a work, but Bret was total reality to me, and that's why I have so much respect for his work. And then finally, when I came into WWF, I shed the ringmaster gimmick. I came up with the Stone Cold Steve Austin thing. I went through, all the little trials and tribulations, and I had these moments where, give me some color commentary, opportunities, working with Aldo Montoya, cutting promos with him. And what I was doing, I came in there as a heel, and I just started talking so much trash, so much shit, that people started gravitating towards that character. I'll never forget one house show. Brian Pillman comes in. Of course, me and Brian were good friends from WCW's our Hollywood Blonde days, and we'd kind of separated. He'd gone through the things that he'd gone through, and I'd gone my direction. We were singles now. And I remember coming back from the ring one time, and Brian had watched the match, and I got a louder pop than my babyface opponent. And Brian said to me, "God damn it, kid, you're a babyface." And I said, "F you." Because, dude, you take this stuff serious. When you're trying to be a heel or baby, and I'm trying to be a heel, and he's calling me a baby, that's damn near an insult.
Yeah.
And I said, "F you, dude." I said, "I'm a heel." And so all of these things started happening. And, we had the Royal Rumble in San Antonio. I get tossed out. I come back in behind the referee's back. I end up tossing all those guys or Bret over. Then we did the final four-way. When I went into that match, I truly did I was sick as a dog, got a blown-out wheel. And then, we kept going, and I kept being a thorn in Bret's side, and I kept attacking him backstage. And we, like I said, I was probably the substitute, and, maybe we were going to go our own separate ways. And I'll never forget, before WrestleMania 13 happened, it was 2 weeks before the match, I believe, because I've always told this story. And I'm in San Antonio watching Monday Night Raw, and all of a sudden I see it announced that it's going to be Bret the Hitman Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in a submission match. And I was livid because I am not a submission-style wrestler.
Yeah.
I, got dropped on my head. I turned into a brawler. I was starting to become somewhat hot as a baby, but prided myself in being a heel. All of a sudden, I'm going into this match with Bret the Hitman Hart, which I love that. But the submission part totally threw me. And I remember I voiced my concerns to Vince McMahon because I truly felt that they were putting me in a compromising position because I'm not a submission wrestler. Everybody knows I only had about 3 or 4 moves, and the rest were raking the eyes, ball shots, and stuff like that. So this is not going to be a match that's catered for me. And as we rolled into Chicago, before we went to the finish room, I just knew, and Chicago was becoming somewhat of a stronghold for me. For some reason, those fans really kind of gravitated towards that character and myself. And I just figured we're going into this thing. I believe we were the third to the last match. We were in a real good position. There was a buffer match between us and the main event, which was Sid versus Taker. And, man, I really thought, and I believe Bret shared his same sentiments with me, but he probably thought the glass was half full, being the worker and person that he is. But I thought we were going to stink the joint out. I truly did. And we did everything but that. We ripped it apart with a 5-star performance and started the execution of what, we would need some work on the back end for Bret to turn heel and for me to turn babyface. But like he said, maintaining the both styles of work with which we had.
Steve, let me ask you a question. Like when you were saying that you were kind of, pissed off that this was going to be a submission match and you didn't have any submission moves and things like that. Was it? Did you know at the time that Vince was wanting to go in the direction, or did either of you guys know that he was wanting to maybe kind of do a switch there with you turning more babyface and Bret eventually turning heel and kind of starting the ball rolling on that? And was it almost him kind of foreshadowing there, like putting you in a match that people know that your character is at a disadvantage? You know what I mean? Like, is that kind of like the kind of foreshadowing of that type of thing? Like you're already at a disadvantage going into it?
I don't know what I didn't know what Vince wanted out of me as far as after that match and what direction I would really be going in. And Bret, being the veteran, having much more of a relationship with Vince and having been there for as long as he had, probably knew way more than I did. I didn't really, understand the magnitude of everything that was about to happen, and that I was going to transition into, one of the hottest baby faces in the history of the business. And this was going to be, I can say right now, without Bret Hart, in my career, I don't think I have the career that I ended up having, whether you start with Survivor Series or talk about this match and just our feud in its totality. I would have never been the same, or I probably would have never, ever reached the heights that I did had it not been for Bret Hart. But I did not know, coming out of this match, things would go like they did for him and for me.
I think too that, like, you said that you thought this match you were going to stink the joint out, and I think something can be said for it too. I think that the best performers, and I've said this a lot in the past, always produce under an immense amount of pressure, and it's almost like when you go out there with that fear, you produce something special. Is that kind of what happened here? Like, you just had that a chip on your shoulder that you went out there with that, oh my, this could be really bad, but it ended up being a classic.
Well, man, no, I didn't have any fear in me whatsoever, because I was riding pretty much a professional high, because mechanically I was very good in the ring. I was very aggressive. My character was in a very good position. They were putting me in good positions. And I knew with working with Bret, I figured technically, we could stink the joint out. But if you'll remember this, Bret, we went to the finish room. And as I remember this, it's Bret, myself, and Vince McMahon. I don't remember anybody else being in that room. And we're going over the match. And we're not going over the match. We're going over a finish, because this is the way it was back in 96, 97, whenever this match was. He says, I want you guys to go out there, and at the end of the match, Bret's going to have you in a sharpshooter, and you're going to pass out. And at this time, there was a no-color policy in the Federation. Nobody bleeds. Nobody does nothing. So, he gives us our marching orders. Bret might have asked a question or two, but, we went out, and we kind of just walked out to the arena. Nobody's out there. The doors aren't open. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm really second-guessing this finish. I was always willing to put Bret over, but I was second-guessing me passing out in the sharpshooter. So I circled back around to Vince. I knocked on his door, and he let me in. And I said, Vince, are you sure about this finish? I said, man, I don't know. I said, are you sure about this finish? And he goes, oh, this is a straight-up quote from Vince. He goes, oh, goddamn, Steve, I promise you it'll work. And I said, okay, and I trusted him. And that's when I went back out to Bret, and we started pacing around the ring, just kind of chatting. And Bret said to me, and he goes, Steve, if you're going to pass out in the sharpshooter, you need to have color. And I said, man, do you think? He goes, oh, yeah, I know. Well, here's the thing. There's a no-color policy. I've been in the company probably about a year. I don't have any stroke. I don't have any pull. And so Bret, being the veteran that he is, he says, if you want, I'll do it. And I said, because that's meaning he's taken me under his umbrella policy of seniority and his legend that was ongoing in the WWF at the time. So I said, okay, man, cool. So people have always asked me, hey, man, you never did any blade jobs in the past? People said, Bret Hart cut you. Were you afraid? No, I wasn't afraid. I'd done many blade jobs before. But when the man, Vince McMahon, says no color, man, I'm going by those orders.
Yeah.
And Bret was covering my ass. We needed that drama at the end of the match. And I have another story as we get into the match, but I'll never forget Bret making that call. And when you look, and I've watched this match twice because I knew we were going to do this show, that imagery and how Bret brought the offense to me, that grinding style that he always had, his intensity and his focus, especially when he's working my leg, that color, that iconic visual of me, and I timed that sharpshooter. It was between a minute and a half and 2 minutes. And from when he put it on, when he turned me over, to when I just passed out. And that was absolute magic. And obviously his altercation when he went back to working my leg, and then Ken belly to backs him, and then the way Bret cowers down from him or just turns away from him, his step through of that rope, his paws on the apron, the timing, the deliberation, the way he did everything that he did was just absolutely magic. And you can go through this match and you can pick up so many subtleties that a rookie or someone without a trained eye would just gloss over and miss. But it was absolute magic that night. And I didn't mean to get ahead of myself, but I'm going back to the fact that Bret suggested, Steve, you need color, and he was right.
Well, that's a great point, and I took notes on this thing because I went back, I rewatched, I peeled it apart years ago, but peeling it apart now and seeing it again, it's still just like you said, the subtleties in this thing. And so, Bret, you talked about how, let's say in a perfect world, you and Steve work for the first time at WrestleMania, or it's the last time, it's your blow-off. It's not that. So, and it's a submission match, to Steve's point. If you listen to the commentary, Vince covers it. He says, Steve can beat, Bret into submission until he gives up. So that at least covered that, because I get that aspect of,
correct.
Well, they're not going to think I have a chance because this is Bret's specialty, and you want there to be some question as to what the finish is going to be. But you guys come out, the glass breaks literally for the first time. Bret, you come out, you walk over that glass. I mean, you guys are fired up. Steve, you're like a damn bobblehead up on the ropes there. Bret, you're power walking down there. You could feel that you guys, whether it was exactly where you wanted it or when you wanted it, that something special was going to happen. At least me as a fan, and still a fan watching this. The intensity at the beginning, Bret, did you feel like that was the tone, set right from the double leg at the beginning?
Well, I think, I just want to say, right off the bat that, before Steve ever came in, I was always going to Vince's office and always going to, why don't we have Steve Austin? He was going to Stunning Steve, I think, and but even when he was in WCW, and then he went to, I remember going into Vince's office and going, why, he's in ECW now. My God, why is this guy not, why don't we pick this guy up? Because they were looking for guys all the time. And I remember it was about a week or two later, Steve was in the dressing room, and he started for us, or for WWE at that time. But I always had respect for Steve, and we had we seemed to, gravitate to each other working-wise. We always worked well. I don't remember ever having we always had just great energy in the ring, and his characters are against my character, always worked really well right from the get-go. And I remember him working those spot shows in Texas, and I remember going to him, talking to him about how I had always wanted to work with him, and I think I did have a lot to do with him finally getting booked and finally taking a look at him and closer look at Steve. We're going into that match. I think the Rumble set it up really well, and Steve had cost me the title against Sid when I won that Final Four. So, there was so much stuff that we had that was always sort of just on the back burner. We weren't always the primary focus of the shows at that time, but we just sort of worked well with the bits they gave us. And going into WrestleMania, I mean, I knew from my own experience with Bob Backlund and I had an I Quit match with him. I think it was WrestleMania 11, which was maybe my worst pay-per-view I ever had. And no offense to Bob, because it wasn't Bob's fault either, but submission matches are a death sentence. They are really, you take out half the fun of false finishes with pinfalls. I mean, that's way more spots you can do. It cuts your match in half as far as what you can do. But knowing that and knowing those two characters, I guess Vince, we got to give Vince the credit, I think, for the vision of the match, of a submission match, because I was like Steve. I thought it was really going to be a bad match for us to showcase our talents. So when we, if anything, it should have just been a rematch period. But a submission match limited us, or at least I thought, and I felt the same way as Steve. But I also knew going in there that when Vince had started to he wanted to turn me heel, and I could tell even going into that for the last few months, that was when the fans started to kind of take to the heels a lot more for there's ECW or what. But I remember the heels were starting to get over, and they were starting to cheer Steve a lot because he was really a cool heel to sort of take a liking to. And the baby faces, and I was at the top of the heap, but I'd been sort of on top for a while, and they were kind of getting tired of that milky white baby face. And so there was a change coming, and we could all smell it in the air, and I could sense that Steve was the guy. You know, he was gonna get over so strong, because whenever you get over so strong as a heel, you're naturally, sooner or later, you're going to turn babyface.
Yeah,
that's where the money is. That's the genius of being a great heel, and the payoff comes when you turn babyface, much the way Steve did. And I could see all that long before it ever happened. And I knew going into that match that we needed to have a real ass case. I remember the psychology me and Steve talked about when we walked to the ring was this thing, like if I was in this reminds me of a school fight. That's what I always remember talking about. So this is like a school fight with two, like, you know, the guy that's the quarterback on the football team that's been a good guy for, you know, everyone in high school knows he's the dude kind of thing. And Steve's like this badass that just came from another school. And there's going to be, you can see this kind of showdown coming for a long time. And it's like they're going to fight after school. And this was that match. And right from the leg tackle at the beginning of the match, you know, it had a sense of realism to it that I always loved. I really admired the way we worked. You know, it was one of the easiest matches I ever had in my life. There was absolutely just great work, everything. And even I always tell people, I said, this is the greatest match I ever had, in the sense that no animals were harmed in the making of this movie. Like, it was really, you know, the best spot I remember being in this. The only potato I gave myself was that when Steve threw me into the hockey boards.
Yes.
My God, that hurt like hell. I remember lying there on the cement going, why did I do that? I ran into it as hard as I could, just like a turnbuckle.
Well, I got a question on that.
Hell.
I got a question on that too, because I mean, that, to your point, Brett, that's the art of it, is to not harm any animals in the making of this film, right? But Steve, you took a backdrop down the stairs.
Yeah.
What the hell? Like, how, that had to have hurt, right?
Dude, that gets them every single time, you know, because I think I was probably on offense there for just a second. You know, we were 50-50 throughout the match. And if you watch this match, one thing I love about it, because Bret is bringing it, he's probably bringing a little bit more offense on a percentage level than I am. He really took the match to me, and then I make a couple of, babyface comebacks on him. But Bret really brought the action. And the brawling was kind of 50-50, but I would probably taken over at that point. You'll watch at certain points in this match, you know, you got to turn it back around. So going for the old pile driver, whether you're on the ground, on the cement, or on the stairs, you know, that's a great spot to turn it around. And actually, because the stairs are sloped, it's an easier bump than it what actually looks like. It looks very painful. It's pretty effective and pretty easy. And going back to Bret's point, the match was so easy because you'll see a call here or there, but heads are down. You'll never see any mouths move. And going back to when we came back over the guardrail, or maybe this was after the clothesline from the apron to Bret on the floor, and I see the staircase laying there. Well, when Bret and I had kind of talked about this match, there were maybe 5 to 7 things that we knew were going to happen. The rest was all called on the fly in the ring, and that's a shoot. And so I see these stairs, and I said, oh, man, Bret's laying there. He's selling for me. And then so I just, as I'm getting up, I say, kick me. And he kind of goes, huh? And I just said, kick me. Because I was going to pick up the stairs, and I was coming at him, had the stairs over my head. So if he doesn't kick me, I've really got to hit him with these stairs. And, of course, Bret, kicks me in the gut. I go ass over tea kettle backwards. He takes back over on me. It was just little things like that, and feeling that crowd and just really listening to the crowd. And we just, like I said, you can watch that match and you won't see a lot of communication because it was really just going from one thing to another. And there's no tells, there's no foreshadowing in this match. You don't say, oh, you can tell this is going to happen, because the match was completely, like I said, we had bullet points. And one of the cool things about this match, where I'll let you guys go back to asking questions, was even getting towards the end of the match. We knew that we wanted to use the bell on the finish. We just came out of the blue. I was going to wrap the extension cord around, and when I did that in very dramatic fashion, 3 wraps, so everybody gets it. Hey, he's got a friggin' extension cord. He's fixing to choke Bret. Yeah. But it's the introduction of the bell. Bret got me in a compromised position. He brings the bell, puts it on the apron, changes his mind. Hey, a steel chair would be better. Mm-hmm. So we introduced an object there that we're going to use for the finish. It's there, ready at hand. He goes back, gets the steel chair. He's going to do the Pillman, put your leg in a chair, leg in a chair and jump off the turnbuckle. I beat him to the punch, clocked him with the chair, but it's just little things like that, and we knew that was going to happen. But it was such an easy match to work, and with all the flip flopping and flying that's going on right now, this match, although it was done, it's WrestleMania 13, and we're going into WrestleMania 34. All these years later, this match still holds up, whether it was back then, right now, or in the future, because of the physicality, because of the intensity.
Yep.
There's nothing crazy that goes on in this match, but it's so real it will hold up to the test of time.
It goes back to what I mean. I say this a lot, right? I mean, and I think that sometimes they get away from the essence of a lot of times what a match is, and that's selling. Like sometimes that's kind of becoming a lost art form, and I think that was apparent in this match when it's done right. You don't need the huge moves and all those other sorts of things to kind of fill in for that. Like, I mean, when you were talking about lifting up the stairs and him kicking you, just the way that you felt looked like you almost broke your ankle. You know, and just that subtlety on that sell, and then when you get up in the ring, and how you were saying how aggressive Bret was on his offense, and then he climbs up to do the forearm we've seen him do a million times when the guy's in a prone position, but you weren't in that position. You were trying to pull yourself up off the mat, and he's like attacking this wounded animal that's fighting for his life. Like you're trying to get up, and he hits you with that forearm as you're getting up, and just little things like that to me mean more than just throwing out like a big move just for the sake of doing it. You know what I mean? And then later on, when you had when you said you got up and he had your foot in the chair and you stopped him, and when you got up, you didn't just start hitting him with the chair. You hobbled around the ring, and then that you didn't oversell it for the rest of the match, but that affected you the rest of the match. You could see you had that limp, that hitch in your giddy up the rest of the match. It was there, and that told the story for the rest of the match.
It did, and it was gritty, and the way he was attacking me, and the one spot, doing the sit down thing on my legs, dropping the arms on inside my knee, and finally he was going to drag me back to the ropes again, and I just said, "I'll move," and when I moved, he came down, and hit his ass on the mat. That's when I hit him with a stunner out of the blues, and to get back to cell mode. But and if you'll notice, then he sells the stunner. I can't win by pinfall, as Jerry Lawler, covers in the color commentary. Yep. And I've got to add, the commentary in this match was spectacular. A lot of people think Vince McMahon is over the top. Bullshit. He brings so much enthusiasm, passion, and he's the master storyteller. He's the owner. He's the booker. He's the vision. He knows everything. He didn't know about the color, but he knows the story better than anybody because he's had the vision and he knows where we're going. Jim Ross was absolutely on fire, and Jerry Lawler was on fire. Mm-hmm. So, after that stunner, I blind feed back to Bret, who, I want to go back into cell mode. Bret kicks my leg back from under me, and there we go, back into action. It was just tit for tat and nothing spectacular. It was just a working man's match with no crazy bumps involved.
But the thing about what I loved about this match is it felt real. It felt like a fight. It looked legit. And I'm not saying all matches today, but a lot of matches today look rehearsed, look choreographed. This did not look like that. This looked like two guys that were trying to beat each other. Even the swinging neck breaker, Bret, that you hit on Steve, the struggle that you two had until you hit it, those little subtleties that put it over the top. I mean, the crispness was there. It looked amazing once you guys got there. But to get there, there was a fight. And I wish everyone would go back and even just watch that little bit. Watch the whole thing, but just watch what I'm talking about on that neck breaker. And
I think that the best wrestling always tries to pretend to be real. It's got to be you want to be real. And I think if there's anything that really shines in this match, it's the fact that we both had realistic styles. Steve was a real kind of character. So there's lots of badass kind of guys like Steve in the world. And when his character was forming, it was like such a cool character. I remember I liked to him as a heel character, I think, just as much as the fans did. It was he was a great character to interact with, like to mix everything up with. And, I love the match for its realism. I think I always tell people, so when you watch UFC, like a really, really good UFC fight, at the end, you kind of breaks your heart that, that they hurt each other as bad as they do. And in this match, it's like, okay, everyone knows it's a work, but this match delivers everything that the greatest UFC fight can deliver. And if anything more, like they don't use chairs, they don't use bells, so this is an intense, very physical kind of, build up to this match. It's just the wrestling, the realism of it. I think I always tell people it's the most real kind of match that I put on for people. And yet when I say all that, it was one of the easiest matches of my career. It was so easy. And it does make me kind of laugh sometimes when I watch a lot of it back, because I remember I had told Steve, like we had talked about getting the color in the match. And I said, as I remember I asked Steve about doing it, and he said he'd done it a few times, or he'd done it once or something like that. And I remember I said, you don't want to take any chances at WrestleMania. Trust me, let me do it. And I remember he trusted me, which is I learned the first thing I learned in the business, to never let anybody do that to you. And Steve totally trusted me. I said, I just trust me because I'll do it right. And I remember could be a lot of heat. I mean, I could have been just as much trouble as Steve at that time. They had no blood policy for a while, and the toy companies and everybody were on Vince's ass, and like, no blood. And I go, well, let's just pretend it was an accident. What are they going to do? And I remember I kind of had Steve talked into it, and I said, but if you change your mind, because it was a pretty serious decision to go in there and make that call, and for me to make that call for Steve or vice versa, it was like, I said, if you change your mind, we'll abort. We'll if you really feel uncomfortable about it, we won't do it. I said, but if you give me the green light, we're doing it, and there'll be no turning back. And so we were in the ring, and I think it's somewhere in there just before I got tossed out of the ring. I asked Steve if he wants me to do it, and he goes, yeah. And then as he's throwing me the ropes, he goes, maybe we better not. And I remember hearing it and going, I had already got it out and had it in my hand. And when I landed on the floor, I got it out, and I remember Steve goes to throw me into the railing, and I'm reversing Steve. And if you watch, I'm going into Steve's ear, or I'm yelling out to him. It's like, it's too late. Everybody yelled out, too late. And I remember I walked over, and I remember, I'm looking right at all the fans, and Steve's looking at the fans. It's right in front of everybody, including Vince is like 1 foot away. And, we did it. And if you look at it, it is absolutely perfectly done. There's hardly any, it's not a big open gash, and it's not just it was just a perfect,
it was a master class of color.
Yeah.
Another beautiful part of that match is like ball shots. Ball shots are almost a cartoon thing now, and have been for a long time. They do the ball shot, the punch up the arm up the crotch kind of thing when the guy's standing over you and stuff. It was always kind of lame. And but I knew with this match with Steve, when I'm punching the shit out of him in the corner, and then when he kicked me in the crotch, there's nobody laughing in that crowd. It's like a shoot. It's like absolutely totally real, and it's and the work behind that. I mean, nothing hurt. He kicked me perfectly, and it's just beautiful, expert wrestling skills. Two guys that really, really work well together. And I'm watching on my screen here in my house, and I'm just watching where I've just cut Steve, and it's like there's no way anybody. There's fans all watching, and nobody saw anything.
I remember
as real as it can ever get.
We were watching
I remember
it.
watching. Yeah, we watched it together.
Yeah, and watching that reversal, even just the reversal. If you guys, anybody in the industry that's listening to this, again, watch that reversal and watch the way it's done and the way Steve goes into that barricade. It looked like you ate that thing. And Mark Yeaton's running, Howard Finkel's running. And then, Bret, you just shield yourself a little bit from Vincent that quick. But there's no way at that. I did not. I was like, oh, that was Hardway. I remember watching it, thinking, okay, that was Hardway. There's no way. And
and also I think that the distance that Steve went when the reversal happened, it was almost like whether you consciously or subconsciously did it, but for me, when I took it out, especially when I just watched it back recently, it was one of those ones where, the wheel went out on him again. He's in trouble. The reversal, he can't put the weight on the leg, and boom, like it to me, it just, all that stuff ties in psychology-wise, and that's when things start to really, that's when the story, that's what makes a match,
Well, going back to that, when we were in the ring, it's the gut shots. And Bret starts teeing off. He's really working my midsections, about 5 punches. And then he goes to hit the ropes, and I sidestep him, send him between the second and third. Okay, that's the spot. He goes down. Bret carried the blade in his mouth, spits it out. He picks it up. As I'm picking Bret up, because we had the crowd, hook, line, and sinker from the get-go, from that double leg. And if you remember the double leg at the beginning of the match, I give him a look. I'm looking off to my right because, I'm not going to look directly at him. I'm just looking off into space, and then I make the attack. So I'm looking him off, and boy, we're at it. So then we go to this spot, the drum shots, and then I sidestep him out. He goes down. As I'm picking him up, what I said was, because we had him hook, line, and sinker, was judgment call. Meaning, if you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, we got him. Sure enough, he comes, and the way he goes in that, dude, this is a Surgeon General. Yeah. And again, the only reason I wasn't going to do it myself, because I didn't have the seniority in the company, and I didn't want to get my ass handed to me by Vince. So I was under Bret's insurance policy. And so Bret did it. And he did it so quickly. When you watch the way he walks up to me, he actually hits me in the right tricep with it, get a little gas there. You never see him do the cut on the forehead. And then he gives me a couple of rabbit punches and gives me a big right hand. And when he gives me that big right hand, I do a big swing with my head, and I splatter blood all over Jerry Lawler's notes. Jerry Lawler, years ago, showed me, he had them in his briefcase, his notes from that very WrestleMania. And there was just my blood splattered across his notes. It was incredible. But you couldn't see it. It looked like a shoot. It looked like it was a hard way on the guardrail. And, man, I to this day, and it was that cut was probably only about a quarter of an inch long, if that, and it was not deep. And I hadn't taken any aspirin for some reason. 95% of the time, anytime I've gotten color, being bald, it really works for me, and it is a great visual. And I don't know how Bret hit the spot that he hit, but it wasn't a gasher. It wasn't anything that needs stitches. It wasn't anything severe. It was just absolute perfection.
Another part of that match that was a big moment that almost backfired for a little bit was like when we talked about the bell, setting it on the apron, and I appreciate Steve's kind words about that earlier, but we had the bell on a certain side and left there intentionally. So Steve needed to throw me out at the end of the match. He needed to throw me out on the bell side. Steve, we didn't really think about it, and all of a sudden Steve threw me out on the wrong side of the ring. And as he threw me out, he realized, like, oh fuck, it's the wrong side. And now he jumps out of the ring kind of like hoping I'll fix it. And I'm going, I got to fix this. I got to somehow get to the other side. And Steve's going out to get the cord, I guess is what it was. And if you watch it, it's in a second or two, I got up and fell back in the ring and took a bump inside the floor, on the floor. And then, like, I was dazed and confused. I staggered and fell out on the other side where the bell is. But then Steve would have come in the ring, and I would have been on the wrong side where there's no bell, and I wouldn't have been able to reach the bell. And he would have, so it was just a little small thing, but it was a case of, I think you can see when Steve walks down to get the cord, like it's like, he's got to hoping that I'll somehow fix it and be on the right spot, and I'm right where I need to be on the end, and it works perfect. No one even suspects. It just looks like I'm trying to get the hell out of there and kind of escape.
Well, yeah, and to me, it just looked like Steve, as this frenzied kind of like those bursts of stone cold. That was one of those, and it's just like it's frenetic at that point, and look out, who knows what's going to happen, kind of thing. But I want to backtrack real quick to the usage of color in this, and I get why they don't do it now. I understand with all the risks and the ramifications and possibilities and everything like that. But can you think of another match where the use of color means so much, and in the truest sense, where red means green? Like, imagine this match without that color.
Well, I think it's the whole thing. I remember, even when it was over, I remember everybody thought it was the hard way. Like, and we just went along with that. It was never really much of a question. And I think Vince asked me about it, and I said, no, it was hard way. And that was the last I ever, and it's just funny how, it came across. It was the perfect bit of realism it was the visual of it all. I think, I can't say that I saw it other than I knew that this is where the one, I was not a big juice guy. I was never a big juice guy. There's certain situations, and this was one of them, where you really need some juice to make it work, to make it really, and at this time, which I love in this time period in the business, people still thought wrestling was real, like a lot of people did, and the work that we, perform in this match still lends where people that, especially I find people from foreign countries that don't really watch a lot of wrestling or know, think this is as real as anything they've ever seen, and it's so you go back to that time period and how people kind of didn't know, like the internet today, or they didn't know who was turning heel before the wrestlers did. And, this was still, there was a bit of a veil on the business still. And I know from talking to countless old timers, including my dad, after this match, this was their favorite match. I've had so many people like Dory Funk and people talk to me about this match was just their favorite match, what they all did years before of realistic, kind of credible wrestling matches of the highest caliber, from Harley Race to all the guys that came before that were hard-working wrestlers that sold the realism of it. And I think I really, when I look at this time period, I go, it was really changing. The fans were changing, and there was a confusing time. I know going into Chicago, I had a lot of kids that were my fans. I still was over with small boys and young kids, and I started to lose the male team. Like, they were starting to I still had the old timers, but they were starting to go for something different. The bulk of the youth in wrestling, the audience, were like teenagers or males, I think under 30, and they were starting to go for the bad guys. And Steve was such a unique character that even then is when I really loved the Steve. I know Steve's career took off in all kinds of ways after I left WWE, but I loved this time period. He was such a great villain and such a good promo that was fresh and different. And I've always been really proud of Steve and his career. And this match, I know that, like Steve said, that maybe had a lot to do with his success. Steve would have got where he needed to go no matter what, because he was just too good a worker and too good a talent. But I think this was I just knew what Steve needed, and I knew how to work with a guy and we both, there's never a struggle in this match. There's never a question of me wondering what Steve's doing. Whatever Steve does, whether it's the neck breaker or the stunner right out of nowhere, it's always like makes sense. And if I cut him off with a kick in the knee or a thumb in the eye, and we just always had, I think, right from the day one, we had a good chemistry. I don't remember ever having a bad match with Steve ever anywhere. And every time we worked, it was always a big smile when we saw each other in the back, and it was like that was great stuff. Like, we loved working with each other. It was, I loved every minute of working with Steve.
Bret, one of the things I wanted to ask you, because you said it before, and what you were just talking about, you were feeling a little bit of a changing of the guard, and you could tell you were losing parts of the audience, but you still had different parts of the audience from a babyface standpoint. And so, me, obviously, I was very in tune with who was cheering for me and who wasn't as well, or who was booing me. That's what I was really concerned with, and because I was trying to be a heel, and this was a transition match. But I've always, as deaf as I am and as hard of hearing as I am, when I get into an arena, I can hear a mouse fart. And, man, I am really in tune with that crowd. I am hearing and feeling everything that they're giving me. And I know who I'm getting. I know who I'm not getting. And, when this match was over, I'm laying in a pool of blood. I passed out from the sharpshooter. It was one of the greatest feelings I've ever had in my life. There was still work to be done on my end, getting to where Vince ultimately wanted me to go. There was work to be done on Bret's end. Shamrock helped that along, and Bret's subsequent promos would help that along. But I just remember laying there, and I didn't really, I always knew it was a great match. I knew that probably no one was going to follow it, and we just blew the roof off that place. So I was feeling good about what we had done in the small picture. The big picture was yet to happen. So my question to you, Bret, as I'm watching myself sell the sharpshooter and limp up the aisle, and their Austin chant starts, and I let them in for about 3 seconds. I don't acknowledge them. I look at them to acknowledge them. I don't shake my head and nod for them. I let them in just a fraction of a second there, and a lot of people will watch us and not even realize what I'm doing. I'm not trying to just all of a sudden switch baby, but I'm recognizing the fact that they started chanting Austin. So I knew we'd rock the joint. Bret, when you left, people were cheering you. The one guy flipped you off, and you flipped him off back. What were you feeling after going through a hellacious match? It was a physical struggle. We had a blast. We told a great story. But what were your feelings knowing where you were going as you walked back, to the dressing room area?
I knew that I was going to turn heel the next night in a very subtle but strong way, with the way I did that promo the next night. I kind of knew where I was going. I was a bit worried about, I wasn't sure how the U.S. bashing thing was going to go, and I was kind of trusting Vince on a lot of that. But I knew, I'll be honest, it's like psychology is something you learn in life. And I think if I learned the psychology, I knew the psychology of the match from a school fight. I remember that there was a fight much like this. I watched it. I wasn't in it. But it was a sort of a baby face against a badass kind of a tougher guy, or like guy that was got into more trouble and stuff like that, and was a kind of a badass in school, and he was new. And I just remember the fight, and I remember it was a really good fight. It was toe to toe, and both guys, were laying a lot of shots. It was an intense fight. I remember finally the babyface won with a really big punch or knockout punch at the end of the fight, and the other guy gave up. And I remember watching it, and I just remember somehow, even though the bad kid started it and picked the fight and he was expected to win, and the babyface won and just beat him fair and square. I remember it changed at school. Like the next day, the guy that lost, everybody loved him. Everybody had more sympathy, and he became somebody that he never changed anything. But anyway, the whole thing was played out like I remembered it in school. And I remember Steve's character at that time, and I kind of knew that I knew with the blood and the way that match came off. I knew that I had helped make, Steve was over for everything he had done on his own, but I knew that match and our sort of working together and piecing that masterpiece together was in fact a masterpiece, and that was going to, be a game changer for him. And I think it was. It just sped up a lot for Steve. I think everything that was going to come to him anyway. But I also think Steve learned a lot working with me. I mean, we'd worked at Survivor Series, which was really good. We had some really great chemistry in that match. And I recommend anybody that wants to watch a good match to watch that one too, because it was just as good, or in a lot of ways comparable. Mm-hmm. But when we got to WrestleMania, I think we had worked enough that we didn't want to do what we had done before, so we got to change it up and do something different. And that's it. Like, is the brawling kind of badass, tight, tough fight that we had. I loved it for that psychology, and I think going back, I knew Steve was going to be and I remember Steve talking to me about it. He didn't want to turn babyface too quick. He wanted it to be a really slow evolution where, he was maybe thinking of turning heel a year later. And I was thinking, well, good luck trying. You're going to be turning babyface a lot faster than I think a year. But I wanted to, whatever Steve wanted to do, I wanted to help him achieve that. And if he wanted to take his time before he turned into a babyface, then I would try to help that. And, I think that the psychology of that match was just the perfect formula for Steve to launch himself even more into that character, that badass character. And not to mention, I think the genius of the screw job and Vince playing the bad promoter and all that coming up down the road was just classic stuff, and new and ahead of its time. Nothing had been done like that in the business before, and Steve's got to walk right into all that. It was perfect timing, and I've always been really glad about that.
Well, in this match, I think, Steve, you wanted it to come, maybe later, but there was 2 points in this where it was undeniable to me that, you were definitely going to turn babyface, and maybe sowed the seeds of becoming, the biggest babyface in the history of the industry. And it was after the nut shot, which, by the way, again, back to your point, Bret, it meant something, and it looked like a hoof from the basement, like your nuts would be in your cheeks kind of thing after that. But then it was the chest buckle. It was the sell off of that, but it was Steve's sell too. That fired up, chuck to the corner, the stomp, the double birds, blood everywhere. It's like, okay. That, and to me, Steve, when you were in the sharpshooter and you brought that one hand up and you dug it in like you're in a damn trench, digging into the dirt, getting ready to come up for that first push-up, I was like, oh, man, that was it. That right there is, to me, the 2 moments where, as a fan, it's undeniable.
I would agree with that point too, and I was thinking the same thing. And also, if my memory serves me correct, when you hit the double bird, was that the only time that you did it in the match? Because the roof blew off, like you were stomping him down in the corner, and you threw those double birds, and the roof about came off the place. You
did it to Shamrock real quickly too at one point.
Well, I did it to Shamrock because Bret is working the hell out. And so, he was asking me, do you give up or did I want to quit? So I just give him the double bird. So that one almost didn't count, but, they covered it on commentary, that I was answering, his question with sign language. And then going back to Bret, I entered this thing, I got a good response going out, but it was more heel. I got some positive. I got a lot of cheers, but I was more of a heel. Bret was way more of a baby, somewhat of a heel. Just from entrances. And then, there was 2 moments. The one when I fired up on him with the chair, I caught him with the chair on the turnbuckle, hit him with the flat chair on the back, picked him up with just like basically a scoop slam, sent him into the turnbuckle. That's when we switched it back around. But then going back into the stomps in the corner, I remember stomping people in corners before, but never had I done something like this. And it was totally on the fly, totally organic. I just started off because when I talk about, great baby faces, I always tell baby faces, and I talk about it almost every show because not everybody still gets it. As long as I've been saying this, if you're going to be a great heel, you have to have a mean streak. You have to be legitimate, but you have to have a mean streak.
Yep.
When it's time to get that heat, as a baby face, you have to have fire. Now, all I knew was I needed because whether you're a heel or baby, there's that explosion when it's like that guy's beating the shit out of you for a while, and it's time to make that comeback. And so it was a display of fire, and people they just came like fire for that. And it was just stomp, and just the way Bret sold it and went down. And then I just started going into the rapid fire. People do that to this day. I've emulated that spot. And then there was a double bird, and that last one was a stiff one right to the forehead. And it was totally working, but I know it didn't kill him. But, man, dude, that was totally spur of the moment. And that's how I really felt, and that's what that character did do. And, you know, it just ended up being the perfect thing, and especially with the direction with which I was going to go, whether I remained heel or babyface, you have to get animated. You have to give a shit.
Yep.
You have to be emotionally involved. If this guy's we've been battling back and forth, and the stakes, everything's on the line. I ain't going to tell this guy quit, and he's not going to tell me he quits, and it's a friggin' fight. And so that fire up was paramount, to that match and to where I would go, because as you listen to the commentary, it's all skewed to, like Lawler says, if Bret loses, what's he going to complain about next? He's a whiner. And then they covered my ass. Stone Cold never said he quit, so commentary's all in line. But that little spot in the corner was just on the fly, ad lib, magic. Yeah. I knew it needed to happen. Bret did too. I didn't say, hey, I'm gonna stomp you 10 times. I don't know how many times I stomped him. That was totally off the cuff, and it worked.
Yeah, and I want to back up to what Adam was saying too, and just to point this out, that nobody took a buckle like Bret Hart took a buckle. I'll just say that.
Nobody.
Yeah. It looked like a finish.
Yeah.
You know,
I think Bret always prided himself in taking those.
I did always pride myself on the front turnbuckles and the back ones. I think I'm paying for all that now. But in this match, I think there's a lot of funny things that is little things that are really exceptional. Like, the brawl. I remember one of the few things that we kind of had going out to the ring, like that we got permission to do or were told it was okay for us to do, was to fight up through the crowd. And, nobody had done that I remember, unless it was by accident at a wrestling show where it was planned. Like, you got permission to go fight all the way through the crowd, up the stands, everywhere you want, for as long as you want to make this match. Because I think that was the result of us complaining about the submission aspect of the match and how dead it was going to be. Just, I wasn't a big fan of that idea. And as Steve already said, but the punches, I remember fighting and throwing punches on Steve, and even if you watch like today's wrestling and you watch punches, the punches in this match are so close. I mean, the fans are right there, so it's like they're right inches away from me throwing a punch. And I know that. I know that's Shamrock kind of pushing guys out of the way and stuff, and there's no security or anything, but it's just, when you watch it, I mean, I love the fact that I can throw these punches on Steve, and he's selling them, and they're right in front of everybody, and they're going, wow, that's as real as it gets, right up close. And it's not like on camera, it's like everything looks so real, right to like the backdrop and the fighting through the crowd. And, I love this match for how, like you were saying, we just switch back and forth all the time. Like, Steve didn't need to call anything. And I'm aware of Steve's, what he's trying to do and how his character is. And there's absolutely no rush or panic anywhere in this match. It's two guys that are so totally relaxed and trustful of each other. Like, there's no hesitations or scrambling, or even from the bell being on the wrong side, there's no panic. It's just super calm, right back to the fixing what we need to do to keep telling this beautiful story. And I love that about this match, that we always had this chemistry. And it's probably, when I think back, it's probably like back then there was Vader and guys like that, and the Final Four. I think the reason me and Steve kept working with each other is we didn't want to keep tying up with Vader. We just kept doing that to each other as much as possible. Steve with the flu and all that, and even the Rumble. The Rumble is a big part of the heat of this match. When he cheated me out of the Rumble, I was still a babyface. And I'm really mad going into this match. He screwed me out of the title with Sid and hit me over with a chair on the apron and cost me the belt for my 4th title win and all that. So there's great. I remember going out like, I should want to kill this guy. This guy screwed me over at every turn and is a son of a bitch. And I'm out to get him. Like, this is a huge heat match. Steve's a super heel. I had so much heat going into this thing. And Steve was a total heel. Like, if you watch that Rumble and you see the look on Steve's face when he sees me come out, he's totally the chicken shit heel that panics right away when he hears my music and all that. And to switch all that to this dog fight that we have, and Steve getting that sympathy, and everyone going at the end of it, you know what? They love Steve Austin better than the guy that won it. And even though I was a good guy, I wrestled Steve. I always loved that about my matches. I wrestled just the same way I would have wrestled him as a babyface, just a little bit different facial expressions and just little things. But it was, I think, two guys that sort of had an idea of what we would and wouldn't do to make each other's characters. And I think I always trusted Steve in the ring, and Steve always trusted me, and we always had a sort of an understanding what we were trying to do together. And I always thought it was just magic, all the time.
Yeah, another one of the little things that especially at the end when you talked about, you rolled out to the other side to get to the right side where the bell was, and then Steve comes in, wraps the cord around you, and you, out of desperation, swing the bell back and hits him. Just even the way that he was just laying there in a heap, it just looked, the visual of it, and then trying to pull himself up and get back in the fight, and you grabbed his foot, and just the way you subtly pulled him it was like an animal like jumping on a wounded gazelle, like a lion jumping on a wounded gazelle and pouncing on him, and to take advantage of that injury, and then you put him in the sharpshooter, and then you start to go from there, and like those visuals from there with Steve fighting, like, to me that is just maybe the greatest visual I think in the history of a WrestleMania.
There was a couple of things in talking to Bret and listening to him. I was just watching this match back, and you're 100% correct. I had never knew that I'd thrown you out on the wrong corner, and I saw you covering, because I remember I'd go out to get the extension cord, and I just saw you. I did throw you out of the wrong side, and I never knew that. And here's two other facts. When we were brawling up, this is one of my famous things, that if you watch some of my matches closely, you'll see me do this. Like there was a guy, this is back when I used to walk around with the Cokes and sell you Cokes while you're still in your chair, and there's that guy there. He wasn't a plant. That was a real guy selling sodas. So I didn't blow up at all, neither did Bret, because we're both in impeccable shape. But I could use a swig of Coke or a swig of water, so I stole one of the Cokes from him. I drank it. My character would do that. Plus, I was a little bit thirsty. And then I throw the Coke on Bret. I go back to grab that tray from that guy because I was going to wrap it around Bret's head, but he wouldn't give it to me, and it was strapped to the back of his head. So I said, well, fuck it. I can't take it. I can't wrestle it from this guy. And so me and Bret do action. And then another thing that happens in the match, early on, we go outside the ring, and I'm going to suplex Bret and crotch him on that guardrail. So I do that. Well, the security guard is in the way. So Bret hits his leg and kind of splits him over a little bit. And we wanted to maximize that bump a little bit better, but the guy got in the way. And as I take off, I go to clothesline Bret. And as I'm clotheslining Bret, he's straddling the guardrail. If you watch his back in the beginning of the match, as Bret is going ass over tea kettle over the guardrail into the audience side, I can feel his arm underneath my stomach, and it starts torquing. I'm thinking, man, I better get off his arm because it's going to break, because something's got to give here. So if you watch me clothesline, it's Bret's right arm. I can feel it underneath me, and I come up off of him. You'll never see me do it, but I was cognizant of the fact that his arm's about to break if I don't get off of it between the fulcrum and that guardrail. So, yeah, I never realized that I'd thrown you out on the wrong side, Bret, but you are correct.
At the time, I remember you actually, if you look closely, you see you kind of cussing as you're walking down to get the apron, to get the cord, because you telegraphed to me, because you knew in the ring, you said something along the lines of, I fucked up, or I'm on the wrong side, and it was like, sort of like, okay, so I know, and I realized that we were on the wrong side too. But you were aware of it walking down, and you basically knew, like, okay, I'm going to go down and get the cord now, and somehow you got to get on the other side. And that's exactly what I did. It was because you tipped me off that I needed to get over to the other side. So, I mean, you were still, on top of, you were totally on target still. It wasn't like we had it covered. As soon as it was, again, there's two guys just totally working with each other all the way through, and it was just, when I watch it back and I see it, I know that this is one of the first pay-per-views I had in a year or so that that didn't hurt. Like I remember even a Survivor Series when I wrestled Steve, I was in a lot of pain. I had been off for about a year, and I wrestled Steve after I worked with Sean, and I had supposedly gone home to rest and all this stuff. And I took time off, and when I was coming back, that's when they worked for Steve. But I was really sore after the match with Steve. We worked really hard. I hadn't worked I worked a couple of times in the summer, and I worked sparingly anyway. And I was off for 6 months. And so when I started wrestling after the Survivor Series, I was in a lot of pain every night. I'd crawl back to my room every night, and it took me about the Royal Rumble to get where I didn't hurt anymore. Like I broke myself back in. But I remember being in a lot of pain. Everything hurt, and I was really sore and almost getting where I was wondering if I could get back to my old form and stuff, because I was just aching everywhere. And I started to kind of get back to form after the Rumble, and by the time I got to WrestleMania, it was just a really good time in my career where I was back on track. I had my timing back after that layoff, and if anything, it proved itself in the sense that we had a better match than that Survivor Series match. And I don't know how Steve felt about that Survivor Series match, but I thought it was as good as we could have done. I thought it was a great match. I loved the match, and I thought the intensity and all that was so good. I thought that'll be the best match we ever had. And then, of course, this one at WrestleMania was just a climax, even more above and beyond that. It was just such a good, like I said, I always compare it to a good school fight. And had all the psychology of a really good school fight between two really tough characters that were getting ready to deliver a match that had a lot of emotion in it.
Shouldn't be understated, too, how important a ref is to a match like this as well.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about the importance and how well Shamrock played his role in this, because I mean I think the job of a good referee is to be out of sight until it's time not to be out of sight, right? And like he played the role to a T, and especially all the way to the end. Like, how important was his role to the overall scope of this?
I thought it was extremely important to the match, just because this match was built. It was a hot angle. Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret the Hitman Hart, and it was a submission match. Anything could happen. I love Shamrock, and I was watching his entrance to the ring, and then I watched my entrance to the ring, and a little bit of interaction between me and him. And then my notes here are: Shamrock goes to the ring. He looks great. He has tremendous star power. There was a danger factor to Ken Shamrock, and if anything got out of hand, he could fix it, because he was the most dangerous man in the world for a shoot. He had charisma, and he was a perfect ref for this match, and he didn't try to steal the attention away from myself or Bret. He played it very down the middle, very vanilla. And I thought Ken Shamrock was paramount to the match, and I thought his performance was phenomenal, and his interaction with Bret super important for Ken's character, but also to further Bret's character. So I thought Shamrock was phenomenal.
Yeah, also didn't have to worry much when he went into the crowd when he was there either, huh?
No, he helped. No, he didn't. We didn't tell him anything about the color. Never mention it to him. Never, and you can tell when he sees the blood in the match, it gives him that realism that he needs to play off of, and it's like, wow, he's kind of, for lack of a better word, marking out a little bit. Like, holy shit! Like, no, he didn't see that coming. I don't think he was like, he'd seen worse things, I'm sure, in his lifetime, but I just think it kind of blew him away. Like, wow, this is like, I didn't see that coming, and that was another thing I loved about it, is his reactions and how he plays, how he gets more intense after the blood, even like on the floor outside the ring right after it happens and stuff. It's like he builds right into the whole story of the intensity and the realism of it. And I think it was the right thing to do not to tell him, because it made it more of an element of surprise that you can't capture if you tell him.
And, well, it's a testament to the match itself, but to Ken, the fact that you forget the referee is Ken Shamrock, because he stays out of the way like a ref is supposed to do until it's his time at the end of the match after it's over, and really helps set you up on that heel turn. And, he's there at the right spots, I guess, and not there and kind of ghost ghost-like on the other spots, which is, a good reffing job. Because how does a guy with arms like that, at that point somehow take just disappear from the match almost, except when it's needed. So that
yeah, but here's the thing, guys. I've special refereed several high-profile matches. Being a referee is extremely hard. I have so much respect for them, especially the good ones. Just all of a sudden, you take a guy who's worked for 10 years, as in the case of myself, and when I was doing the referee thing, 13 years, whatever. We kind of know the rules, but we don't know how to ref. It'd be like asking a referee to work a real match. Mm-hmm. So it's two different things. And so Shamrock did a great job of staying out of the way, but he was always visible, never trying to take the attention. Like I said, he's jacked up. He looks like $1 million in the charisma factor and star power. He was great. And I thought one thing that really added to the match, as it added to all the matches, one of my biggest thrills when I first came to the WWF. Well, I'm such a Howard Finkel fan. Yeah. And when I was walking to the ring and I'm hearing, from Victoria, Texas, weighing 252 pounds, Stone Cold Steve Austin, just the fact, Howard's still there. And I love all the other, announcers that they brought in since then. But when Howard Finkel was announcing you, to me, that was the shit. Yep. And it just felt like a big match. And then on top of that, because I was, noting, my interest in Bret's, when you work with Bret, and most of the times I work with Bret, we were building up, even though the SummerSlam match, whatever it was, or Survivor Series, whatever that match was, that was a great match, and there was a great atmosphere, and was at in the Garden, I believe. Mm-hmm. Great crowd. The ring was mic'd different, had a different feel to it, but I love that match. But this, because of where Bret's at in his career, where I'm at in my career, I've already made my entrance after Shamrock. Bret's coming out in the babyface position or in the champion or in the veteran position. And, man, when that guitar riff hits and those streamers or those sparks, whatever, go off on top, the electricity and the way that power chord that Jim Johnston wrote just rips through the crowd, and I'm over there and I'm ready to go. I ain't nervous at all. I'm ready to rock and roll. It just shoots a chill down your spine and through your body. And if you don't understand it, you're dead, or you don't really have a take on the business, or when you're working with someone that's super over like Bret was. Yeah. And then here he comes with that intensity and that focus. Dude, it's a total shoot, and it's a feeling. It's one of the best feelings in the world. Like I said, laying there in the pool of blood was so great because it was all over and we did the job at hand. But one of the funnest things is when you're working with guys of Bret's caliber, their interest will send chills down your spine and give you goosebumps. And I knew at that point, although we could shit the bed, we probably weren't. But I knew when Bret was coming to the ring, I knew it was on in every sense of the word. And it meant so much to me to hear the response that he got, because we're playing off each other. My pop is dependent on him. His pop is partly dependent on me and the body of work which he's putting in. But it just means the world to you, because the way that crowd reacts, you can always rope them, and if you don't have them by the beginning just on entrances, you can get them with the match. But we had that crowd from the get-go, from the entrances, and it was a thrill just to be in the ring when that guy hits the ring.
Well, speaking of crowd reactions, and I know I mentioned this when you slammed that hand down and got ready to dig in and come up in that push-up, you can hear that crowd. That crowd becomes like a tsunami, at that point when you're coming up there. And that is such a huge aspect of, that's when it's changing. And they get that profile shot of the blood just coming off your nose and kind of Rocky Balboaing out in the air kind of thing. And that to me, it's such a game changer. And then that iconic shot that is then on the back of a t-shirt, blood from a stone. I wore the thing for a year straight. That shot is maybe all of 2 seconds, but it changes the course of everything. So you talk about the crowd reactions. That was pivotal. But I want to bring up a really cool point that I forgot about until I watched it today, is the fact that you actually broke it. And Bret, you held on. You didn't let go, but you fell. And that was so huge. it's such a subtle point, but it was so cool. It's the fact like, oh, he broke it, but man, that pit bull, he's still locked on. That to me was such an important moment to add to the realism, and we're talking subtleties. That was a huge subtlety to me.
I actually remember in the ring when we talked about it, I remember saying to Steve that I compared it to that scene in Cuckoo's Nest where Jack Nicholson shows that tries to throw the sink through the window or whatever to get out of the prison. It was the same thing. I said, where you almost, like when he gets out of that sharpshooter, if you want my honest opinion, that is where Steve, that's where they fall in love with Steve. Like, he's a babyface.
Yep.
Because nobody gets out of the sharpshooter. And so for Steve to kick out and actually start, that was when he starts to bridge in the blood and he's pushing, that's the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's right there says it all. Like that moment is done. Like it's forever. And it doesn't matter what happens after that point. Steve is a baby face from that second because it breaks the heart to see him lose. Like when he doesn't and I pull back and I get my balance back and I put him in the sharpshooter, it's just too much for the fans. It's like it's too much of that's the beauty of psychology. That's the example of the psychology of that match. But that's where everything turns. That's where Steve, they fall in love with him as a hero. What he just did is heroic.
And the thing about that was, we knew that I was going to pass out in the sharpshooter. The color was the bonus feature that nobody else knew about, and only two people knew about that, and that was myself and Bret. But when I was in that sharpshooter, Bret and I didn't say, okay, man, maybe 30 seconds in you'll tap, or a minute in you'll tap. We didn't discuss any of that. That was a total work of listening to that crowd, feeling the crowd. I started going out before I did that iconic dig into the mat you're talking about, Edge. And do that. Dude. When you look back at it, that's the stuff that heroes are made out of. Grinding it out, digging in. Oh boy, here comes the big push. But that was a trust factor between myself and Bret. And I didn't want to disrespect his sharpshooter because it was such, a devastating finish when he applied it to anybody. To last, between a minute and a half and 2 minutes with that thing with blood pouring out of my head was just an amazing image. But it's not something we talked about. And, I almost kicked out of it. And so that was a trust factor, and that was two guys out there feeling the crowd, working the crowd. And, it wasn't like Bret was giving me the office when to pass out. That was just him doing his part, me doing my part, and that's two pros on the same page at the same time. Here's two things that, as I look at this match and watch it back, when we're in the corner, Bret's giving me some vicious right hands, and I'd done a sell job into the corner, facing the corner, hanging with both hands. Bret spins me around and starts giving me those big right hands, and I give him that big nut shot. And you can hear Jim Ross go, "That was down from around Saskatoon." And so, Bret's just selling a dead sell, which is a shoot. And then I'm out, and I start, trying to climb up using the ropes. And it was so effective because, he just beating the shit out of me in that corner. What I wish I would have done now, or this is what could have happened, if I could go back in time, I would have milked just sitting, on my ass in that corner, Bret taking a nut shot. We played it for what it was. I got up and we started taking care of business, and it worked. But what if I had waited 30 more seconds before moving because Bret wasn't going anywhere? Mm-hmm. And then what if I'd have waited a minute? And I'm not sitting here, with a stopwatch just clocking it. I'm just looking at the match and saying, God damn, if I'd have stayed down for a little bit longer, how much further could we have drawn them in? And, that was one thing that I wonder about. And then I also wonder if I'd actually broken the sharpshooter, reversed it, and put it on Bret. Then he ultimately reversed it and put it back on me. Then I passed out. That's a what if. I think it played out perfect on that front. But Brett, you see what I'm saying on that ball shot? Because we could have milked that for 5 minutes if we needed to.
Yeah, it's, I always get mad when I see ball shots that are just wasted. That they're just stupid and they don't even look good. But sometimes they're good. That's one where it's like, that's why you don't want to make them a joke or make them just do them all the time. But when you need an ace under the table, this is it's such a cheap shot. And at the same time, with the blood and everything, and me just wailing on him mercilessly in the corner, it's like, come on, there is a bit of like, someone just kick this guy right in the nuts, It's like, and when it happens, it's like somehow this most heel thing that anybody could do to the babyface, that I was still the babyface. It's just brilliant psychology, and I don't know where that spot came from, but I remember thinking, because I always worry about ball shots in the sense that they could be, they sometimes they don't react right, and I remember thinking, when I watch it back and I see how I fell back and how I grabbed, it's just the way it would work in real. And, it's just great psychology. Great. It's not overselling that ball shot. I remember just the way I hit the mat and the way I stayed still. I could have sat there for a minute and everyone in that building bought that ball shot to the tee. And, it's just such great, simple psychology, and wrestling should be as simple as this match is. Everything in this match is so simple, and I love all the little things like Steve said, where like I'm going to get the bell, and then I change my mind. I go get one chair, and I go, no, this one's not, it's got padding on it. I want the other one.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's all.
And then you grab the second one, and there's a Coke spilt on it, which just added. It really did. It's like, he just grabbed whatever one was there, whether it had Coke on it, coffee on it, whatever it was. That just added to it.
All of that. I mean, it doesn't look, like you said about some of today's wrestling, everything looks rehearsed. There's no rehearsing here, and there was no rehearsing. We talk a bit about things that we're going to do and stuff, but I think the way I played that with the chair and the bell and all that, and how this chair's not good enough, was all just spontaneous. But if you, like we did, went out to the ring going, if this was a shoot, I remember we talked about just the eye contact at the end when we're looking at each other. I said, we should try to do that stare down, and I said, you should just come right at me, take me off my feet like a shoot, and just go at it right from there. Like two guys on the playground, soccer field, whatever, at school, and there's the big fight, and everyone's there, and it's like all of a sudden it's like, let's get it on, and the guy just comes. It was just great psychology all the way through. I mean, I really, I always think of this match, like my Ironman match with Sean and even the Wembley match with Davey were really great for me, realism kind of matches. And this one is great realism, and it's all a work. Everything is just the pace, even the pace we cut. I recommend for any wrestler out there that if you're going to cut a pace in a match, you want to cut a match, the same pace that we're cutting in this match. It's not too fast, and it's not too slow. Today's
super intense.
Nobody sells anything, and we get so much mileage out of simple things, an elbow, a kick in the gut, and then we build into things like a nut shot, which don't happen every day, with the chair shot, the bell. I love the bell shot at the end because I know that I totally miss Steve. If you watch that, I totally go over his head. I don't hit anything. I remember going, I hope it looks good because I didn't touch anything. I didn't even, Steve just reacted. I totally missed him on that. I think if anything, I hit him on the back with that bell. And it just looks great on TV. And, even the cord, Steve's wrapping that cord around my neck, which, if you wrap somebody around the neck with a cord like that, you might just strangle him, if it gets tangled up. But, I mean, Steve, it's so loose. But at the same time, you look at there's no danger to me at all. Like, I've never had my oxygen cut off. But at the same time, it looks so real, like a shoot. And that's what I love about this match, is it has all the intensity of a UFC fight, except for nobody got hurt in this one. It was so perfectly done. Even right to the juice. It was like you could put a dime in Steve's head, and it was perfect.
Well, speaking of the level of this match, Steve, you talked about before, with getting the color in this match and not feeling at the time you had the clout to make that call, and you were kind of relying on Bret to do that, and also that the respect that you had and how much you wanted to work with Bret and how much it meant that he kind of handpicked you at one point to be an opponent for him. And Bret, you saying that you felt like Steve had learned some stuff, from you out of this match and the other one at Survivor Series, and from coming out of this match. Now you're on the trajectory of your career changes, Steve. It just skyrockets. What were the tools that you took away from Bret or from this match? And I've always felt like you don't really know what it takes to be a top guy unless you're in there working with top guys and seeing the work that you have to put in and what it takes. What was it that you took away from Bret or this match that helped you on that rise?
Well, just the rub and the fact that we were able to, there were two stars in that match. And two bigger stars coming out of it. And Bret was already established. We were just going to go down different roads. But just my takeaway from working with Bret, just like with many, veterans that I got a chance to, when I was 3-6 months in the business, working with guys like Danny Davis, Gorgeous Gary Young, guys that didn't get great breaks that were very, very good workers and had sound psychology. One of the biggest things I got from Bret, his composure, the thought process that he put into matches. Bret's level of psychology was probably, I'd say it was a lot deeper than mine because we were two different characters, and I think he was a different level of worker and, one of the great masters. So just the thought process, and I think we were both on the same page just from a reality standpoint, and our characters totally meshed. And it was like from the very first match we had to our tours in South Africa to Germany, all over the United States, Survivor Series, and then, WrestleMania 13. Just, I don't know, for some reason, I took away a lot of things, but just his thought process and just the trust. I mean, anytime, no matter where we were, there's just that trust and the sense of, nothing's going to go wrong because I trust him. Yeah. You're going to the ring. You guys know you've been on the road for 20 years.
Composure is a good word. When you said composure, I get that. That's a good word.
Yeah, man. And so you just always know that, nothing's going to go wrong and everything's going to go fine. And just, I loved, I know Bret has talked in the past about not being real fond of some of his promos, but his promos and his feud with me, his promos leading up, to this match with me, him when he shoved Vince McMahon on his ass and he said, frustrated isn't the goddamn word for it. Everybody in that dressing room knows I'm the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. And I'm thinking, I didn't know that promo was going to go down. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, man, this is a fucking shoot. Yeah. And, Bret's lost his mind. So, what I love about Bret was the reality of his character, the psychology of his matches, the mechanics, the techniques in the ring, everything, the presentation. When you watch Bret, you're watching a pro. Anybody can call themselves a pro wrestler, but it's a pro presentation that is truly, to me, the highest art form from a presentation and psychological standpoint. And that's what makes a great performer and a performer that draws money. That's what I took away from Bret.
Well, I'm going to say this. I know we've kept you guys already an hour and a half. I know you got better things to do than chirp with us. But I want to say that, perfection is subjective, right? But in my eyes, watching this match back, it's the perfect way to have a fight within a wrestling match, two characters shifting at the same time, which on paper sounds like it will never work. Yet at the end of this, everyone comes out of it a bigger star. It absolutely changed the direction of the business. From that point forward, everything is different. And I can't think of another match that crystallizes that point any more than this. So I guess in closing, I just want to say it was really amazing to go back, to be able to watch this, and then also to sit down and pick your guys' brains on this, because this is kind of unheard of. So we really appreciate both of you taking the time to do this, because this is the kind of thing that I think it gives people, fans, and it gives people within the industry to be able to sit down and hear this. This is like a master class on how this should be done, whether it's getting color, whether it's the subtleties of a neck breaker, whether it's all of those things. I mean, man, this is just really, really cool. And kudos to both of you guys. There's a reason Jay and I both, are fans of you guys, and glad we can both call you friends too.
Hey, man, on a closing note, I know you guys are going to wrap this thing up, but I want to get this in. Just like Bret said, after this match, I wasn't sore at all. I've been sore after a lot of matches, depending on, what we did. I wasn't sore at all. All I can remember is I bled so much of that match. And Vince is covered on the back end. He goes, this was an ugly match. You don't always see this here. He's already apologizing to all the sponsors or whatever. And then they show a picture of that mat of all my blood. It's just like clumps of flesh and blood. It was gross. It was wonderful because that was the violent story that we just told. So my point is, I wasn't sore at all. I was fresh as a daisy. But I remember it took me about a beer and a half, and I was drunk off my ass because I probably had about two. I probably only had about 2 pints of blood left. It was phenomenal.
Cheap date. Well, again, guys, thanks. This is very cool. And thanks for carving out the time, to do this with us, because I think a lot of people are going to take a lot away from this.
Well, I say, I don't do a lot of podcasts and stuff for anybody anymore. I try not to. I think I hurt too many feelings, and I've learned from that. Sometimes the truth can be a little bit, when you call it the way you see it, kind of thing. And I don't regret anything I said or anything, but I know that podcasts can be a little bit trouble for me. And the fact that we were going to do this today is, I could talk about this match, as you probably can tell, all day long. I talk about it a lot to people, that don't watch wrestling much or have never watched me. I say, watch my match with Steve Austin, WrestleMania 13. And it's one of my proudest matches, and I'm so glad that we got a chance to talk about it. I'm glad it's an honor for me to be on the phone with Steve and just to reminisce and remember it. And it was just a great period in my life, and I know. At that time period, I think I was really in my prime. I was in the best wrestling prime of my life. I was just super form, and it shows in that match with being a veteran or whatever. I mean, I think it was the peak. Even walking back to the dressing room after that match, and when I'm walking back, right after I give that kid the finger, I always think that's how I want to be remembered, is that last 20 feet where I'm walking, the look on my face, and the realism of that match. It was just such a great period. I knew when I came back to the dressing room, and I remember I got met by Undertaker and every other wrestler in the dressing room that has said, good luck topping that. Like they were just in awe. Everybody was like, I think we got clapped for when we came back. I can't remember, but I remember just being so proud of the match, and everybody was just blown away when we came back. And to talk to all you guys on this show, have a chance to reminisce about it is an honor for me. And just you guys, the questions you asked and everything it was a lot of fun, and I appreciate you giving me the time to rehash and relive some of the memories.
Well, again, man, thanks, guys. We'll let you go, and I know you got stuff to do, but that was really, really fun.
It was amazing.
That was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your guys' time, and they said it's a timeless match. I think that'll be shown in any era, and will always stand the test of time. So obviously something to be proud of for both you guys, and should be a match for aspiring wrestlers to be studying for years to come, I would think. But thanks again so much for your time, guys. Really, really appreciate it.
And guys, on a closing note, I'd booked a 3-hour time slot, so if y'all want to talk for another hour and a half, I'm good with that.
Let's do the don't look at me.
Yeah. For how long? Hour and a half.
Hey, man, thank you guys for having me on the podcast. It's always good talking to Bret. Everybody, I don't want to blow too much smoke up Bret's ass, but he knows I love him and I loved working with him. And it was it was extremely important in my career, and I appreciate everything he did with me. And I have so many great memories of our times in the ring. And then over in Africa and Germany, when I'd go out of my way to try to pop him or make him break character and laugh in the ring, some of the ribs that we played on each other, that's a podcast for another day, but nothing but respect for Bret the Hitman Hart. He truly is one of the greatest of all time. And this podcast reeks of awesomeness, so thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks,
guys.
Bret. I truly don't think it gets any better than that.
No, I mean, my mind is melted from sitting in on that conversation. I mean, think about it too, right? Like, I mean, you and I watched that match together. I don't know how many times. Like I said, when we were up and coming, and we were studying that match and like slow motion, putting it like in frame by frame, and watching it in slow motion, different things, why they did certain things, backing it up, watching it again and again and again, and then to become, get into WWE and travel with Steve and get to pick his brain when he was like on, the top guy, and then to come to know Bret. And become friends with him and be able to sit down and have dinners with him and hang out and become friends with both these guys. And now for them to come on this podcast after all of that and sit here and just listen to them talk about this match, it's surreal almost,
Yeah, and, just to, as peers, be able to sit down and pretty much have all of the same points.
Uh-huh.
I think all four of us, after watching it back, all riffed on the same things.
Yeah, and I know, like, as we were talking too, and like, there's a lot of times you were asking a question. I was like, damn, I wanted to ask that. It was like, so, but it's funny because we do think a lot alike as far as certain things go. So that's not surprising. But man,
but again, they were bringing up points that I was like, I wanted to talk about that. And they already brought it up.
It was good though, right? Because we're just same thing. We're just kind of sitting there, fly on the wall, like getting to listen to these two guys. But the thing that stood out to me the most is the respect that these guys still have for each other and had for each other. And what each guy meant to the other one. So. And Steve, basically, like I said, arguably the biggest star in the history of the business, saying that without Bret, he wouldn't have got to where he was at. That's pretty huge.
Yeah, I mean, as we've talked about, Steve was going to get there, but that match, man, that changed the direction quickly. If there's a graph, it spikes after that, and T-shirts are created from it. And like we talked about, I'm not a big fan of color in the business, especially now and where we're at and the knowledge we have and all of those things. But man, that is an instance of it meaning so much and changing what that match, how it's viewed. It'd still be a classic.
It also shows you the genius of Bret to make that call, right? Like to knowing risking what, that they could both get in serious trouble over it. But to him, and he's also trying to help Steve get to another level as well, right? And that's both guys working together, and just shows you the psychology that no, this isn't going to work unless this happens, or it could work, but it's not going to get the same effect. And he already saw
essentially,
that,
pitching something that's going to, in the end, help Steve more than it's going to help him. If you're looking at it in that way, it's going to help them both. But that's a pretty selfless call to go, okay, I'll put my butt on the line too and do this because it needs it. In order for this to be good for your character, Steve, it needs it. And how good Bret did it. I mean, you watch it back and but if you didn't know and it hasn't been talked about, then it was done so seamlessly and so well that you really, even after years in the business, have to sit there and go, okay. Okay. It just, there's so many aspects of it. It's a master class on character, on less is more, on getting mileage out of things that may seem little but are not little, because
little
when
nuances that little things
little
add up.
subtleties.
Little things add up, and I'm a super stickler for little things. And like they were doing things in this, even watching it back now, that were blowing my mind. And
like you talked about, the reversal on the outside when Steve kind of stumbled.
Yep.
It just looked so out of control and real and not pretty, and the whole match was not pretty, and I mean that in an absolutely in the best way possible. It just looked like two guys that were trying to be the best.
Yep.
And
really
also
hated
we
each
didn't
other
even
and wanted to fight.
Yeah,
like
and
Brett
we didn't
said,
even
Brett's like two guys like in a schoolyard that just were going at it, and everyone's standing around watching these two just slug it out. That's the great analogy of it.
And we didn't even talk about the fact that I think that was the first time he used the figure four on the ring post.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking that too, but it was kind of too far in. But I'm not sure if it was or not. But that was pretty pretty integral part of the match too when he was working on his legs. So yeah.
Yeah. And Captain Lou and Tony Atlas in the front row, I completely forgot about. And I love when they go into the crowd. Captain Lou goes straight into oversell like old like 70s Carney mode.
And also, I
awesome.
want to call bullshit on something Steve said, because he said he only has a few moves. I think Vince must have known when he thought of the submission match that Steve had one submission. Because he did the leg sweep like octopus move with the leg over the head. He pulled that out in there.
He also did Boston Crab.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them, and then he went for a sharpshooter. So he knows a few.
Yeah.
But
he's sneaky.
We talked about that, though, how well the commentary and how on point that commentary was. A three-man booth, and all three of them were hitting different points and covering all of the points. Vince saying that, Steve could beat Bret into submission was a huge point to make the match, on an even keel.
It suited his character more than a guy that's going to go out there. And yes, he did throw in a Boston Crab, but those are, and the other one, whatever it is, the octopus one that he did. But staying true to his character, he more realistically would beat the shit out of a guy enough where he's like, okay, I've had enough. And that made sense.
And JR, saying, you're not going to make Austin submit, and kind of foreshadowing eventually where it went, but you wouldn't think that, if you're watching. It was just so well done on so many levels.
Yep.
And
again, special thanks to those guys for taking the time to let us all sit under and listen to this conversation with two guys that have most respect for each other, and put on a clinic that night in WrestleMania 13. So again, thanks Steve, thanks Brett. It really meant a lot that you guys did that for us. So,
well, and you talked about how you can tell the respect that they still have each other. One of the things that is built through a match like that, or is something that stands the test of time like that, is this almost brotherhood or sisterhood, or that you've shared something that that has stood the test of time. And I would think it's a music producer and a band, or it's, pick the analogy, pick the comparison. And I think we have the same thing with the Dudleys and the Hardys, and you have it with Randy, and I have it with John or Taker. It's just one of those things that when you are able to create something that people still talk about, then there's that instant brotherhood, and you just pick up where you left off. And it was really cool to hear that with those two, arguably and unarguably, actually, the two of the biggest ever to lace up a pair of boots. And it was just, like you said, fun to be a fly on the wall for that. And from at that point, really kind of just starting to think about getting to WWE, and when that match happened, and fast forward all these years later, and to, like you said, be able to sit down and just talk to them about it as peers was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, again, we thank those guys, and thank all you hosers. So for sticking around and listening to us for a year. So this was a good way to kind of cap the year off, the year that was in the ENC Pot of Awesomeness, brother.
But seriously, it has been. I think throughout the year, people have started to hop on board and realize what this thing is all about, and that we're just two goofs having fun. And if that's your bag, then you're going to enjoy this. So thanks for listening. And
we're just two guys trying to get these fucking marks to buy our T-shirts at Pro Wrestling. ProWrestlingTees.com.
That's how you want to end the
No, I was
1 year
kidding.
anniversary?
Matt's going to edit that out. I was just joking. I was trying to pop you guys.
He's not going to edit it out. Yeah, so anyway, thanks. It's been a slice, and I hope you enjoyed this one, because this one was pretty damn special in our playbooks. So we'll see where we go from here.
Yeah, brother. All right, hosers.
Without further ado, we
kept you
have
long
to go.
enough.
Yeah, this is a long one. But it was worth it. It was worth it, I think, folks.
Yeah.
It was worth it, hosers.
Ooh.
All right.
All right.